This is DW News Africa. War in DRC is making the Ebola outbreak worse, says the World Health Organization, and it calls for a ceasefire. Can DRC hope for a peace deal? What does the country need right now? And how can you mitigate against irrational fear? Just a few of the questions I'll be putting to the Congolese Foreign Ministry. I'm Michael Okwu. Welcome. War could make an already catastrophic situation in Democratic Republic of the Congo far worse. A dire warning from the head of the World Health Organization. He's calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Ebola-affected region of DRC, warning of a, quote, collision of disease and conflict, pleading for the saving of human lives above all else. Take a look at the apocalyptic scenes from the town of Mongwalu, at the epicenter of the outbreak, where rumor seems to be spreading as fast as the virus.
As family and neighbors grieve, local emergency health personnel carefully and respectfully handle the highly infectious remains of a child victim of Ebola. An emotional moment made more difficult by a dearth of resources and by disinformation.
There are rumors. This is the first time this community has faced a situation like this. There's never been an epidemic of this magnitude in the region. People are now saying the disease came from this or that personality in the region. And now they have taken action.
Action in the form of an angry mob attacking this hospital, demanding the bodies of relatives who died from the Ebola virus, then burning down medical aid tents from the international group Doctors Without Borders, staffers evacuated. In the chaos, some 18 Ebola patients fled and blended back into the city. A search is on to bring them back in hopes they haven't spread the virus further.
At first, when there were deaths, people talked about the coffins being a problem. And even those who had seen the coffins spread those rumors.
That was the story at first. People were talking about a coffin that kills people. And then people started dying.
Another rumor says that emergency personnel are spreading sickness via radio antennae on their vehicles.
Even though people are dying, they don't believe Ebola exists. That's the first challenge.
At the hospital where that first challenge, Ebola's existence, has been confirmed again and again and again, they're hoping a pharmaceutical team can quickly develop a vaccine for this strain of the disease to prevent further spread.
For more on this, I'm pleased to welcome the Foreign Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Thérèse Kayikwamba Wagner. Your Excellency, we're grateful you made the time. I hope you'll permit me to start with a few
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We're going to start with a few public health questions because everything you do as Foreign Minister is happening against the backdrop of the latest Ebola outbreak, one of the biggest stories in the world at the moment. As of this week, here are the rough numbers. More than 1,000 suspected cases, more than 230 dead, and we're talking about a strain for which there is no vaccine. Health experts were alarmed that the outbreak had already spread to hundreds of cases before it was publicly confirmed. Why did it take so long to sound the alarm, and what does that say about your country's surveillance system?
Well, I think what's important, without wanting to go into too many details, is to understand that this strain of Ebola, which is one that is only the third time is appearing, is a strain that in its symptoms is less visible and less violent in its manifestation than other strains of Ebola. And this explains to a certain extent why when cases of deaths occurred, they were not directly identified and linked to Ebola. Of course, there will be a lot of, soul searching and retroactive analysis that will have to happen in order to better understand why community alert networks did not respond fast enough, did not raise the alarm fast enough. But this is for one of the main explanations we have to date, the fact that in its manifestation, this strain was less violent, and therefore communities that are, to a certain extent, not as served as in urban areas, did not detect this, and this explains the delay in signaling the different cases of unexplained deaths that were happening in the affected areas.
Dealing with this massive medical emergency presents DRC with a huge challenge where it will surely need all the help it can get. What is it the world needs to do most urgently right now?
So right now, and we're very grateful for it because it is taking shape as we speak. Right now, we need more assistance in order to help us provide healthcare to affected communities. It is making sure that we have greater capacities in contact tracing in order for us to better contain the disease. At the same time, we are very grateful of the fact that there is a lot of research happening in order to see if and when a vaccine can be developed for this specific strain of the Ebola virus. As I said, this is a rather rare strain of the virus and also explains why, to a certain extent, not much research was put into finding a vaccine. The Congolese government has been mobilized right from the start as soon as the epidemic was confirmed, and we have been working very successfully with our different partners. I think it's important to emphasize the fact that the Congolese government and the Congolese healthcare community has over the years acquired solid expertise in dealing with Ebola. And so I think what is very important now is to make sure that our different partners who want to help us weather this storm accompany us in making sure that we bolster the capacities that are on the ground in order to serve communities as soon as possible, in order also to inform and recomfort or provide assurances to communities that are affected by the illness.
Apart from the sheer scale of the outbreak, probably the biggest on record, one of the most disturbing and, I have to say, puzzling aspects is the apparent superstition surrounding it. People burning down medical facilities, fleeing treatment, and disappearing into the community where they will only spread the virus further. Your own Roger Kamba, Minister of Public Health, said, quote, "This isn't some mystical illness, but irrational fear has clearly become the master here." How can you mitigate against that?
Through information, through sensitization, through presence in communities. And I think it's important to highlight that this is not something proper to the DRC. We have seen it in other Ebola outbreaks outside of the DRC. We have seen it in other health crises. I think we have seen it, for example, during the corona pandemic. It's very normal for people disregarding which country or continent you may be looking at, it's very normal for communities to be skeptical, to be afraid when they see an illness manifest that they did not see or know before. And it's also very intimidating for these communities to then be confronted to strangers, foreigners. And when I say foreigners, I do not necessarily mean non-Congolese, but I just mean people who are foreign to them, come into their communities, telling them how they have to live their lives, how they have to bury their loved ones, and how they have to very often put their customs and their traditions aside to preserve lives, bearing in mind that customs and traditions are the things everywhere in the world that give us stability, that give us security. So these reactions, as unsettling as they may be for us, as disruptive as they may be for such a high-level response and priority response, they are unfortunately very normal and not specific to the DRC. This is normal human behavior. These are communities that are scared and that are facing an unknown threat and that are being confronted with realities that they did not anticipate. So the answer to this is making sure that we remain present in these communities, that we also, whilst we commit important resources to build health facilities, commit important resources to research for vaccines, that we also commit important resources to be close to communities, to sensitize communities, and to communicate with them. I think what is also important is to make sure that health services are invested in a long-term manner in order for these issues not to be foreign, but actually for healthcare to become a more integrated part in the daily lives of a lot of communities. And this is why we see a lot of this happening in rural and underserved communities, because the interaction with healthcare providers, unfortunately, is still not as intense or as frequent as we would want it to be.
Your Excellency, you are well aware the outbreak is unfolding in a conflict zone with an estimated 2 million people already displaced in the east. As we understand it, the confirmed cases have now spread across Uturu, North Kivu, and South Kivu provinces, the same provinces where M23 rebels are still active. How do you contain a public health emergency when you don't control the territory?
Well, I think this shows us to what extent this is an issue that converges, unfortunately, with security dynamics. What is very important now when we're faced with a disease such as Ebola is the capacity to respond fast. It is the capacity, as I said before, to have the trust of communities. And this shows us to what extent the M23 and Rwanda, because it's important to emphasize that the areas we're speaking of are not just occupied by the M23 rebellion, they're occupied by Rwanda and the Rwandan army. It is difficult to envisage sustainable and successful emergency response in areas that are occupied by foreign forces. This is why the Congolese government insists on the fact that more than ever, Rwanda needs to withdraw out of the DRC in order to enable the Congolese state to resume its presence, but also to provide the direly needed humanitarian assistance and healthcare that is necessary in these areas in order to prevent any further spread of the disease. I think in any conflict situation, what normally has to prevail is international humanitarian law. It is the law that governs us even in moments of conflict. Unfortunately, we have seen over the months and years that Rwanda has no respect whatsoever for that. But this situation is shedding a different light on the overarching dynamics. And I think it is an imperative now for us to make sure that the access is given back to the Congolese government in order for us to avoid any catastrophe and further spread of the disease.
Minister, I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying that in order to properly contain this emergency, deal with this emergency in the eastern part of your country, it is contingent on Rwanda's removing themselves from that space?
Of course, Rwanda has no interest whatsoever in preserving Congolese lives. We have seen that over the past years.
So the disease could run, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that the audience is clear on this. The disease could run rampant in that part of the country. You're suggesting,
of course,
if your combatants maintain their presence there.
Of course. And in addition to that, set aside the fact that Rwanda has no respect whatsoever for Congolese lives and no interest to preserve them. You add to that their proxy, their M23, that is, setting up the semblance of a parallel administration, but has no experience whatsoever in running an emergency public health response. So these are the ingredients. In addition to that, of course, all the other challenges that we have seen in other parts of the country, these are the ingredients for a catastrophic further evolution of the disease in these areas. And that's why it is imperative, it is a public health imperative that Rwanda and the M23 withdraw from these areas, and that the control of the situation is handed over to entities that A, have the mandate to do so, and B, have the experience and expertise to do so. And Rwanda is neither equipped nor willing to do that.
I understand that these are your combatants, but given the severe the severe case here, The fact that you have a virus, a highly contagious virus that could kill hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Is there any effort on the DRC side to work with your enemies here, with the M23 as well as the Rwandan government, to start effectively dealing with the public health emergency? Other than
the
asking
issue
them to
here,
leave the space.
Yeah. Well, the issue here is what can we expect from the M23? When you speak of working with them, are we going to train them on how to run a health emergency response? I don't think so. Rwanda denies the fact that it is present, in the DRC. So obviously, they are not going to play an active role. We find ourselves in a situation where one side of the equation, Rwanda, being unwilling because it would be confirming their presence, and the other side of the equation, the M23, is unable because they do not have the expertise. Now, in a situation of such a magnitude, the imperative is to save lives. The imperative is not to satisfy the political appetite of Kigali or the political appetite of the M23. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of human lives that are now on the line. And this is a moral imperative. And I think it is important now for all stakeholders to acknowledge the extent of responsibility they're willing to bear in light of such an impending catastrophe. For the Congolese government, it is clear that the Rwandan government has no intention in providing a response in DRC because it would confirm its presence, even though it has been established. And on the other side, the M23 is ill-equipped, unable, and unfit to run a catastrophe response of this magnitude. We need to have the experts on the ground, and these are international experts as well as Congolese experts. The Congolese government must return to Goma and Bukavu.
Let's talk more directly about the war in your country, Minister. How confident are you that we'll see a robust peace deal in the foreseeable future?
We are working towards it. The Congolese government is resolute about putting an end to the conflict. First of all, our priority has always been to reunite the Congolese territory with the areas that have been occupied and that continue to be occupied illegally by Rwanda and the M23. So there is no doubt about our resolution and our resolve to find a solution to this crisis. We are still continuing our talks in the framework of the Doha process, talks with the M23 in order to come to an agreement. I think what is important, just as we have seen it with the agreement we signed under the aegis of the United States of America, is that whatever agreement we sign, it is something that is binding, that holds us all accountable, and that has repercussions for any violation of the agreement. This is why we welcome the sanctions against Rwanda that less than 24 hours after signing the peace deal in Washington attacked the city of Uvira. We need to break the cycle of agreements being signed for the sake of signing agreements towards going to agreements that are enforced and enforceable and that hold stakeholders accountable for any violation. And this is our priority for the talks with the M23 that are ongoing.
Rwanda justifies its forays in eastern DRC around the presence of the FDLR, the Hutu militia with roots in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. U.S. talks in March produced a commitment from your government to make intensified efforts to neutralize the FDLR. Is dismantling the FDLR genuinely achievable? And do you believe if you did succeed in dismantling it, Rwanda would actually leave?
Well, again, this is why it is important to have enforceable agreements. If Rwanda claims that the reason why they are there is the FDLR, and that despite the fact that it has been ongoing for 30 years, despite the fact that Rwanda claims to be one of the safest countries and with one of the most performing armies, if at the same time this is the only reason why they claim to be in the DRC, if this is what it takes to get them out of our territory, we will do the necessary. But it's important to have an enforceable agreement because the minute Rwanda overstays their stay, so to say, the minute Rwanda does not pack up and proves that it is present for our minerals, it is present for our land, then there will be repercussions, there will be consequences. I think this is why we agreed to saying that we will fight against the FDLR, neutralize the FDLR, because if this is the priority, to resolve the presence of Rwanda, we are happy to deal with it. The FDLR, and we are always clear about this, are a Rwandan product. They are Rwandans and they are not Congolese. They ought to go back to their home country under the circumstances that have to be provided through DDR processes and so on and so forth. But they have no business being in the DRC. And we want our communities to live in peace. And so we have every interest to make sure that this issue is off the table once and for all. And then we will see if Rwanda comes up with a new pretext, with a new excuse to show up in the DRC and to loot our mines, to steal our land, to rape our women, and to kill our children.
Minister, you signed the Washington Accords with Rwanda's foreign minister in June 2025. As recently as March 2026, the DRC and Rwanda were back in Washington, agreeing yet again to concrete steps and de-escalation. An indelicate question, but what do you say to observers who've come to believe your signing of agreements with Rwanda has become a ritual that produces paper, not peace? And secondly, what leverage does Kinshasa actually have over Kigali?
Well, the agreement does not produce paper and not peace. I think the agreement produces consequences. I think it is a very important consequence that is unfortunately unreported or insufficiently covered, that the Rwandan army is under US sanction. The entire army of Rwanda, the fourth largest UN peacekeeping troop contributing country, is under sanctions of the US Treasury. I think this is a very important consequence and repercussion. I think this is a clear indication that we have moved out of the sphere of talk being talk and not having repercussions. I think it's important to highlight that not just the army, but 4 of its top generals are under US sanction of the US Treasury. This shows that there are repercussions. There are consequences when agreements that are signed are being violated. And this is what we have been missing for the past decades. Now, what are the levers that we have towards vis-a-vis Kigali? I think what is important is that we are engaged in a long-term perspective and vision of where we see our country and our region going. And I think this is the most important lever that we have vis-a-vis Kigali, who is still engaged in a very short-term perspective, not looking at what it has to offer to its people and to the people of the Great Lakes region. We are offering something different. We're offering the perspective of shared prosperity, of peace for our people. And I think this is an important message to also convey to our different partners. There is a stakeholder in the Great Lakes region that is investing in war, that is investing in conflict, that is investing in displacement and in looting. And there is another one, a bigger one, a richer one, that is investing in long-term stability, that is investing in respecting the rules of the international rules-based order, and that is investing in honest and frank partnerships. This is a big difference.
In closing, Your Excellency, as you know, the U.S. sanctioned your former president, Joseph Kabila, for actively working to undermine this peace process. And your government's commitment under the Washington deal to neutralize the FDLR has so far amounted to little more than leaflet drops and radio broadcasts. Are the obstacles to peace only external, or does your government bear some responsibility too?
We're doing our utmost to respond and to honor our commitments under the Washington Agreement. I think what is important when we look at the situation with the FDLR is that the largest number of FDLR are concentrated in areas that are currently occupied by the RDF, so by the Rwandan army and by the M23. This makes operations, whatever kind of operations, be it sensitization operations or tactical operations, extremely complicated or basically impossible, because Rwanda is basically there, right next to the FDLR, despite the fact that they seem to have a problem with them. We do not shy away from frank conversations that we also have with all of our partners. And I think this has helped us also root out challenges or issues that have come up and that have come up as hindering our efforts towards honoring our commitments. So despite the fact that this may not always be public knowledge or appear in the public space. There are very robust conversations that are the foundation of our relationship with our different partners that are helping us to find a durable solution to this conflict. And sometimes these involve conversations where we talk about what needs to be readjusted, where we can show up better, and where we can make a better figure in order to honor our commitments. So whilst they may be front page news, I think these efforts are consistent and they are ongoing, and we understand that in certain areas we also need to do our homework, and sometimes it's not expected in certain areas. Sometimes certain issues come up as surprises, but I think what is important is that we remain committed to finding long-term solutions to the insecurity, long-term solutions to the conflict, and that entails sometimes going through reforms, that entails sometimes going through internal processes to rectify shortcomings, and we have always been committed to that as part of our frank dialogue with our different partners, but also as part of the frank dialogue we have internally with one another in the DRC.
DRC Foreign Minister Thérèse Kayikwamba Wagner, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll end it there. Stay safe. Bye for now.